Regular viewers of the channel will have seen Leo visiting LA recently, where he got a first look at a whole host of new CPUs coming from AMD. While the focus of his videos were mainly aimed at the desktop processors we're about to see hit the market, AMD are also launching a new range of laptop APUs. Today I'm looking at a laptop that contains one of these new AMD processors. This on the desk behind me is the Zenbook S16 from ASUS, and it contains an AMD 300 series chip. I'm going to run it through a host of testing and benchmarks to see just what this laptop can do, and more specifically, what the processor's like. Hi guys, I'm Matt and welcome to Kit Guru. So this is the Zenbook S16 OLED, a sleek new laptop from ASUS. It's thin, lightweight, features a 3K OLED screen and some pretty hefty specs on paper. These laptops are releasing today and will be available from most major UK tech retailers starting at £1,599.99. There are two models of laptop available. The £1,600 I just mentioned gets you an AMD Ryzen AI9 365 processor, which has integrated Radeon 880M graphics, along with 24 gigs of LPDDR5X memory. If you bump that price up to £1,700, that'll get you the spec that we're going to be taking a look at today, which sees the CPU get upgraded to the Ryzen AI9 HX370 and the memory capacity increased to 32 gigs of that same LPDDR5X RAM. So that was a very quick list of the differences in specs at the two different price points. So let's talk about the full spec you'll get if you choose to fork out £1,700 for the higher end model. The processor, as I've already mentioned a few times, is the brand new Zen 5 AMD Ryzen AI9 HX370. It's got 12 cores and 24 threads with a base clock speed of 2 GHz and a maximum boost frequency of up to 5.1 GHz. Interestingly, the cores operate in a similar way to what we're used to seeing with Intel CPUs from recent years. There's a number of Zen 5 cores, and then there are Zen 5C counterparts. The Zen 5 cores will handle intensive tasks, while the Zen 5C cores will deal with the background processing, similar to the way that P cores and E cores work on Intel CPUs. As for power, the CPU has a default TDP of 28 watts, and it also has a dedicated RDNA 2 based NPU, or Neural Processing Unit, for on-device AI processing, which is capable of up to 50 TOPS, or trillions of operations per second, almost as much as the APM figures from some of the best StarCraft players in the world. Let me know in the comments if you get that joke. I'm going to go into more details about the AI capabilities of the laptop and add a bit more detail to that later on in the video. Alongside the Zen 5 CPU cores and that NPU that I just mentioned, the HX370 also boasts an integrated Radeon RX 890M graphics processor based on AMD's new refreshed RDNA 3.5 architecture. System memory comes in the form of 32 gigs of LPDDR5X RAM running at a reported 7,000 megatransfers in Windows. The memory is soldered to the board, so it can't be upgraded in the future. You're kind of stuck with whatever you choose to go with if you pick one up. For storage, we have a Micron 2400 1TB M.2 NVMe PCI Express Gen 4 SSD. It's not the fastest drive by any means, but it will do definitely, reading at roughly 5070 megabytes per second and writing at roughly 3500 megabytes per second when I tested it with Crystal Disk Mark. The 1TB capacity is a bit stingy though. I think ASUS could have chucked a 2TB drive in there. But seeing as this is in no way, shape or form a gaming laptop, then I can forgive them on that one a little bit. The screen on the Zenbook 16 is absolutely glorious. As the name suggests, it's a 16-inch touchscreen ASUS Lumina OLED panel with a resolution of 2880 by 1800. It's got a 120Hz refresh rate, which is adaptive to help with battery life. It works very similar to how high refresh rate screens on mobile phones work. The bezels are nice and thin. The screen to body ratio is 90%. The colours are vibrant and deep, and the screen overall is probably the nicest I've ever seen on a laptop. It's crisp, detailed, punchy, and it's just amazing to look at. The Zenbook 16 comes with a touch stylus in the box that can be used when a trackpad just doesn't cut it. It's great for design work or anyone looking to get a bit creative. It reminds me of my phone, the S24 Ultra, which also comes with a stylus. At first, it seemed like a bit of a gimmick to me, but over time it has become a very useful tool for taking notes and stuff like that. There's a whole host of software packages listed in the document sent over to me by ASUS that are designed to take advantage of the AI capabilities of the laptop, which I'm going to touch on in a bit. But the Amuse design software works particularly well with this stylus, and it definitely brings out a bit of creativity in me and getting a bit stupid with AI prompts and stuff like that. If a stylus isn't your thing, then you've got the traditional trackpad too, of course, and on this laptop, it's pretty generously sized. It's got a clicky and tactile kind of feedback across the bottom section of it, but unfortunately it doesn't click towards the top. It'll respond to taps up there though, so you can use it there if that's what you're used to or how you place your hand on a laptop, but it just isn't as responsive as I'd like to see. The keyboard is a chiclet style design with full backlighting and no numpad. It does have a dedicated Microsoft Copilot button though, because as I'm sure you've heard, AI is currently taking over the world. Overall, it just feels like 99% of all the other laptop keyboards I've ever used. It's nothing special really, but it does the job. The overall design and chassis of the Zenbook 16 OLED is gorgeous. The top of the lid is finished in a mixture of ceramic and aluminium, or aluminum if you're American, with what ASUS call the Ceraluminum process. It feels unlike anything I've ever seen coating a laptop before. It kind of feels like it's halfway between traditional ceramic and then the texture of a chalkboard, or a blackboard as we call it in the UK. It's got a very smooth micro texturing to it. It feels very premium and it looks really nice. It's a great material. The rest of the chassis is just standard boring metal in comparison to that stuff though. It's what we're used to seeing on laptops. I'd love to have seen that ceramic finish everywhere else too, but I'm guessing that would push the price up quite a bit. In terms of weight and shape, the Zenbook 16 is definitely a machine that's been designed to be used on the go. It's very thin and lightweight and weighing just 1.5 kilograms. As for I/O, the Zenbook 16 OLED is following the trend of less is more, although not to the extent we've seen in some competitors like MacBooks and stuff like that. On the left-hand side, you've got a pair of USB 4 Type-C ports, a full-size HDMI 2.1 port, and a combo audio jack. Then on the right side, there's an SD card reader and a USB Type-A 3.2 Gen 2 port. If I were to use this laptop daily, like day in, day out, then I'd definitely be grabbing a good quality USB hub, as having both the laptop and the stylus on charge takes up both of the USB-C ports, leaving you with just a single USB Type-A port and the HDMI port for any sort of external devices. Build quality on the Zenbook 16 OLED is a bit of a tale of two halves. While that top lid coating feels very robust and seems as if it will take a few dings pretty well, opening the laptop up reveals a few things that I think could have been done better. There's a lot of flex in the keyboard and trackpad housing, too much for my liking. And then there's the hinges. While they do feel good quality and you can open the lid with one hand without feeling like you're about to lob the laptop off of your desk, they don't open wide enough out, like with enough angle, to make using the stylus very comfortable. It's much more comfortable writing and drawing on a flat surface as opposed to a screen that's sitting on and moving on its hinges. So that's the specs, the build quality and the design, and so far I have to say that design wise I absolutely love this laptop. It looks very sleek and feels very, very premium. Let's move on and look at how it performs. So it's no secret that the tech world has had a huge focus, almost an obsession on AI in recent times. It's absolutely everywhere and this laptop is no exception. Testing and benchmarking the capabilities of computers as far as AI goes is still in its infancy, and it's something which is going to grow side by side with the technology itself. Leo looked at this in his review of the ASUS Zenbook 14 OLED back in February of this year, and I've run this laptop through the same set of Procyon benchmarks that he did, also using Microsoft ML, as currently there is no option for the AMD NPU in the device selection. This just again highlights the point that Leo made in his video. Testing this sort of stuff hasn't changed much since back in February, and it's a case of testing capabilities catching up with latest hardware releases. With that small technicality out of the way, I was still able to test the Zenbook 16 OLED's AI capabilities using Procyon, as I mentioned, and using that Microsoft ML exactly the same way that Leo did in the first set of results that he showed in his video. And the side-by-side figures show a pretty comprehensive win for AMD. The Zenbook OLED 16 recorded a CPU Float 16 score of 43 compared to the 11 recorded on the smaller Intel-based Zenbook 14 OLED. Moving into CPU Float 32 was the same story. The AMD laptop scored 98 points while the Intel one scored 20. Switching device to the GPU sees the scores rocket up to 349 when using Float 16 on the Zenbook 16, and compared to 163 from Leo's review. And then staying on that GPU but switching to Float 32 makes no difference to AMD's dominance, with the 16-inch Zenbook scoring 254 points and the 14-inch Intel Zenbook coming in at 139 points. So a solid win in every department for this new AMD powered laptop, which could be improved even further when support for RDNA 2 NPUs and the architecture behind all that is added to the benchmarking software. But it's all well and good talking about scores from a synthetic AI benchmark. How that translates to real world use is still pretty much anyone's guess, I suppose. As far as this laptop's performance with AI goes, and as I mentioned earlier in the video, there are a host of programs available to take advantage of the NPU. The Amuse program I mentioned earlier, which handles image generation and design, it's basically on-device processed mid-journey is the best way I can describe it, and it can generate some pretty good-looking images, but it still gets text horribly wrong most of the time, and it really struggles with human faces as well, unless you're an expert with AI prompt writing. It feels like that's a new category of expertise in computing, being able to write a prompt that an AI model is going to understand properly. With that being said though, it's still pretty fun to play around with. There were a few programs listed in the docs that I have that are still in development, so I haven't included them in the review, but one that was pre-installed and ready to go the moment you set the laptop up is ASUS's StoryCube, a piece of software designed to help manage and organise your photos and videos. It's got functionality that we're used to seeing on mobile phones, like searching for content, grouping different media, creating memory collections, all done using on-device AI. A slight bit dystopian, but it is useful if you have a load of photos and you want to find, for example, photos of a specific person or a specific place. So there's no doubt that this laptop is well equipped to deal with AI-based workloads, and I'll happily hazard a guess that the need for this by day-to-day users is only going to increase as AI seeps its way into our lives with each passing day. Now let's move on to look at how this laptop performed through our usual set of benchmarks and tests. Before we look at Cinebench Multicore, let's talk about power and clock speeds and a little housekeeping regarding hardware info. When I first received the laptop for review and set it up for testing, hardware info described the CPU cores as P cores and E cores, which is very clearly an Intel naming scheme. So we got in touch with Martin, the creator of hardware info, to ask about this naming, and he confirmed it was due to AMD not confirming the preferred public naming for their new tech just yet. He reached out to AMD and they confirmed the naming was indeed Zen 5 and Zen 5C. And all credit has to go to Martin as he very quickly updated the software, sent us over a beta version with the correct naming, hence why you now see Zen 5 and Zen 5C as opposed to P cores and E cores anytime I show hardware info on the screen. In regards to CPU performance and clock speeds, the reviewer's guide sent over to me had a few instructions about the fan performance profile in the Zenbook 16 OLED, requesting that I put the fans in performance mode within the My ASUS control software to get the best out of the system. This intrigued me a little bit, so I did a little bit of digging. When running through Cinebench with the out-of-the-box settings, which has the fan profile on balanced, the CPU package power would initially reach 33 watts while boosting, and then settle down and fluctuate between 18 to 24 watts, while clock speeds boosted to roughly 3.2 GHz before dropping back to around 2.9 GHz on the Zen 5 cores and about 2 GHz on the Zen 5C cores. Switching to that recommended performance fan profile doesn't change any power limits that I can see in hardware info, but it does allow the CPU to maintain boost clock speeds of around 3.2 GHz and power use of around 33 watts for a lot longer than when in the balanced profile at the cost of a few degrees of CPU package temperature. So let's look at the chart, and before we do, I just want to mention that I don't have much data to compare this laptop to, as it's a brand new CPU and has seen a pretty big change in how AMD are approaching laptop processing power. I've included data from Leo's review of that Zenbook 14 OLED where I can, alongside results from the two mini PCs that I reviewed on the channel a while ago, as they use CPUs that have a focus on efficiency and power usage like the one we're looking at today. Starting with Cinebench Multicore then, the difference in fan profile performance on the Zenbook 16 is apparent in this benchmark. The balance profile recorded a result of 14,835 points, landing it right in the middle of the chart. Switching profile to performance saw the result climb up to 17,487 points, putting it ahead of the Ryzen 9 7940HS found in the Geekon mini PC I reviewed on the channel a while back. Moving on to Cinebench R23 single core results then, and the Ryzen AI9 HX 370 sits firmly at the top of the chart with a result of 1,953 points, putting it some way ahead of the Intel Core Ultra 7 155H found in that Zenbook 14 OLED. Measuring integrated GPU performance with 3D Mark TimeSpy then results in the Radeon 890M integrated graphics scoring a respectable 3,355 points, showing a decent jump on the 2,797 points recorded by the 780M integrated graphics found in that Geekon A7 mini PC. The LPDDR5X memory found in the Zenbook 16 OLED is incredibly fast, resulting in recorded read speeds of 86,088 megabytes per second and write speeds of over 100,000 at 101,112 megabytes per second. The PC Mark 10 benchmark shows the overall and general capabilities of the system. The Zenbook 16 fell short of the results recorded on the Geekon A7, but this may be due to the CPU being so new. We'll eventually move over to testing with Procyon when we have more data for comparison. Battery life is exceptional on the Zenbook 16 OLED. It is really good. It shocked me how good it is. This laptop measured 13 hours and 56 minutes, or 836 minutes in total when measured in our battery test. Now, this test constantly imitates general productivity-based workloads, so in reality, the battery would last even longer as you wouldn't constantly be using the laptop for that amount of time. CPU temperatures were quite impressive when taking performance into account. The CPU ran at roughly 84 degrees when working through a sustained Cinebench R23 benchmark, while when at idle, the CPU sat around 55 degrees. CPU package power, alongside the impressive battery life I just spoke about, really highlights how efficient this new CPU from AMD is, achieving the pretty impressive Cinebench multi-core results while using just 28 watts of power over a sustained workload. Applying that performance fan profile does lead to a noticeable acoustic output from the laptop when it's working through Cinebench, with the laptop putting out 47 decibels when the fans have ramped up to deal with the power and the heat. While when idle, the laptop is almost silent in my room, measuring the same as the Geekon A7 mini PC at just 33 decibels. Talking about gaming then, I would usually include a full suite of gaming benchmarks in a system review, as most of the laptops and systems I look at have dedicated GPUs and are designed with gaming in mind. That's not the case with the Zenbook 16 OLED though, as can be seen in the TimeSpy GPU results that we looked at earlier. I definitely feel that this laptop has been designed for work, productivity and general use while out and about above all else. I did try gaming on it though, because I'm a massive gamer and a massive nerd, and the experience was a bit of a mixed bag. Running Counter-Strike 2 at native resolution on its lowest graphics settings resulted in FPS of around 30 to 40. Some would call that playable. I would be hard pressed to call it that myself though. Turning the resolution down to 1920 by 1200 in Counter-Strike saw the FPS jump up to 80 plus, definitely playable, but the drop down in resolution obviously led to the game looking a lot worse overall. Playing something more demanding like Horizon Zero Dawn, which was just the first semi-demanding game that came up in my Steam library when looking for stuff to test it, the experience was okay. Running it at 1920 by 1200 on lowest settings netted me FPS of roughly 60 to 70, which was surprising to be honest, especially when considering the Counter-Strike 2 performance. When testing out the gaming performance on this laptop, I adjusted the assigned VRAM. Inside AMD's Adrenalin software, you can adjust how much of the RAM is allocated to video workloads, thus increasing VRAM and decreasing system RAM. By default, the system comes with this setting on minimum, but I adjusted it to 16 gigabytes. There is a custom setting, so you can tweak it a bit more if you want to. Gaming is okay, I suppose. It's not going to break any records at all, but it's serviceable and it'll do in a pinch. I definitely wouldn't want to use this as my main gaming machine by any means though. So there we have it. That was my full review of the ASUS Zenbook 16 OLED, a laptop with a solid focus on AI. Love it or hate it, AI is here to stay, and it's only going to become more prominent, not only just in the tech space, but in everyday life in general. I quite like the laptop itself. The coating on top of the lid is very nice. Ceramic and aluminium, or Ceraluminum as ASUS call it, is absolutely beautiful. The size and weight of the laptop mean it'll be great for anyone who needs some decent processing power and great battery life while out and about. I'd happily use this while at a tech show, for example, to get content back to base as soon as possible. The CPU feels like a big step forward in efficiency for Windows laptops, and I'm excited to see how AMD can further improve their laptop performance in the future, because this is already a very good step in the right direction compared to what we've seen in the past. The screen is very, very good too. It's vibrant, sharp, crisp, and just looks great. As for the pricing, this model costing 1700 quid is pretty fair, especially when you take the screen size into account. Gaming performance was not great, but it was never going to be that great on an integrated GPU. It'll work okay for slower and less demanding or older titles, but I wouldn't expect anything great from more recent graphically demanding games. I only have a few areas I'd like to see improvements made to the laptop itself. The build quality of the keyboard and trackpad housing needs to feel more solid than it currently does. The trackpad and keyboard themselves could be better. And finally, the hinges need to fold 180 degrees to fully accommodate the included stylus. But other than those small gripes, this is a great laptop and an even better showcase of technology progressing and becoming more efficient. And that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave me a like down below if you did. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest PC gaming news and reviews. And if you want to pick up a cool t-shirt like this, head down below the video. You'll find links to our merch store. Head a little bit further down into the description. You'll find links to our Patreon page, our Discord server, and our website if you want to check any of that stuff out. Anyway, guys, I've been Matt. This has been the ASUS Zenbook 16 OLED on the desk behind me. A pretty impressive and nice looking laptop, to be fair. AMD have kind of improved their laptop CPUs quite massively. Anyway, guys, I'll speak to you in the next one. Look after yourselves. Speak to you later.